Your mic is off if you're talking.
I'm so used to keeping it on. I'm so crazy. So I was just saying we're going to start in a few seconds, and I wanted to ask you, Tanner, if you could give the prayer this morning and first introduce your friend. And by the way, friend, we usually have more students, but we have some things going on today, and we're missing some people. So it's kind of weird to have so few. Go ahead, Tanner. Turn on your camera.
Okay. Here we go. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that we could be here for the literature class, and please help that we can have a good day today and have a good discussion, and that we can learn from the things that we've read, and that we can all have a good rest of the day and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, introduce your friend.
This is Deshelle. She's my friend.
Hi, Deshelle.
Hi.
So, are you visiting? Tell us a little bit about you.
I go to school here in Coquille. I'm just going to the high school instead of online. I'm a junior this year, so yeah.
Okay, and you must have spring break right now, right?
Yeah, I'm on spring break.
That's cool. In our area, we have spring break next week. Everybody's kind of different.
Yeah.
Edie, do you want to come on? So this is Edie, and we should have Jace coming, but we have 2 more students that are gone, and then one student that has decided to go on to get a GED and left us. So we have a very small class today. Oh, and Sarah she's usually here too, and she's gone to the temple today. Okay, so I messed up. We were to talk about this nice man on Monday, but just because I've been crazy, having spring break, I lost my brain. I told Tanner to bring a friend and we would talk about this today. So we are going to talk about this today a little bit. And then we are also going to spend some time on C.S. Lewis in Introduction to Till We Have Faces. So I'm really kind of excited because this guy he was one of the first books I ever read when I started reading classics. Just let me give that little message. Oh, okay. So what do you know about Marcus Aurelius after having read some of his works or some of his aphorisms? What do you think of him? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Edie, you look like you want to say something. Oh, Tanner's got his hand raised, and then Edie.
Well, I think just from reading, he was a very thoughtful person, and he would meditate a lot or at least he wrote it all down for us to read. And I think that's pretty cool because sometimes you have those epiphanies and thoughts, and you're like, oh, that was cool, but you don't think to write it down to share with anyone. And so it's just left there. And in writing them down, it kind of makes you see like the different things he learned in life and what he thought about.
Yeah, it gives you quite a picture of the Roman Empire at the time. Well, maybe not a picture of the Roman Empire, but it gives you kind of finally, after studying this Roman Empire, you finally get some peace, don't you? I don't know if my depression this year has been caused by reading about the Roman Empire, but have any of you had any depression a little bit? Because I never really studied it, but this guy, he kind of cleans up that problem for me and makes me realize that there's actually a real person that was good, that really tried to do good things after reading about Caligula and Domitian and all those other terrible souls. Now that I know those are those are emotional remarks, and I'm not backing them up with logic, Deshelle, sorry. But believe me, they were wicked. Okay, go ahead, Edie.
As along with what Tanner said, I think that he what was I gonna say? He was he took the things that he was very observant. He observed his parents, his grandparents, many leaders, and he took those teachings from what they had taught him and made his life even better, which I think is really neat.
Good comment. So we spent a couple weeks ago, we went, and I don't know, Deshelle, if you read the first book in here. I don't know why they're called books, but they're called books instead of chapters. But we kind of read it together as a class, and I just didn't want to skip over it. Did you read the first book by any chance? Did you notice a pattern with it? And are you okay with me asking you questions?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
perfect. It was really cool. I noticed that when he took what he was saying about them, and then he showed how he used it in his life and told us how we can use it in ours, kind of. That's how I translated it. I thought it was really cool, though, just to see the lessons that he learned from different people.
Yeah. And I asked the question a couple weeks ago, have any of you ever taken the time to write down the key people in your lives, whether it's a good teacher at school or it's a leader at church or someone in your life, a grandparent, a parent, a sister, a brother? Have you ever taken the time just to write their names down and write the things that they've taught you? Have you ever done that? No? Edie, you have? Okay. Tanner, you haven't. What do you think would change? And this is for anybody. What do you think would change with you if you sat down and wrote down names of people who were key figures in your life and wrote down what they taught you? What do you think would change in your life? Edie?
Before I attended this school, I went to Williamsburg, and at Elevation they did this simulation, and they wanted us to write down names of people who we respected and write down why we respected them. And then because it was like a simulation, pretending this was the last day of our life,
Oh, that's right.
Or we wouldn't be able to see our family anymore. So it was just really neat to see what sometimes I think we take for granted of what other people have done for us. And yet they have most of them have helped us become what we are. I know, like you, I sometimes take for granted of what you've done for me. Like you made a goal as a 15-year-old to teach your children Spanish. And, I wouldn't have been able to learn Spanish without a mother in the home. So I think it's really neat to see that.
That's nice. Thank you. So any other comments with that, Deshelle or Tanner? Go ahead, Tanner.
I think writing down stuff like that or noticing stuff like that can kind of make you notice who in your life is like a good example or bad example. Or like if you are writing about it and you're like, oh, I learned a lot of things from this person, and then from this person it's like, oh, I learned some things, but they aren't too good.
It kind of helps you stand back and go, huh. It kind of helps
realize which friends you want.
Yeah, that's cool. Very good. Okay, so let's kind of go on to books 2, 3, and 4 a little bit, and we're going to discuss these more in depth on Monday. But look through your book. Do you have a book where you can mark up, make little notes and underline? Find something you wanted to share, maybe one of the aphorisms that, or what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with an M. Maxim. A maxim that you'd like to live by. So take just a couple minutes and look through there. And then start talking.
I saw that there was like a theme going on throughout. I mean, there were several themes, but one of the themes was about procrastination and how we need to spend time wisely and time management. In book 2, page 46 on my book, I don't think you have the same version as me.
No.
It's the 4th
paragraph. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to read it?
Yes.
Okay.
Think of your many years of procrastination, how the gods have repeatedly granted you further periods of grace, of which you have taken no advantage. It is time now to realize the nature of the universe to which you belong, and of the controlling power whose offspring you are, and to understand that your time limit, to understand that your time has a limit to it. Use it, and to, sorry, I lost my spot. Use it, then to advance your enlightenment, or it will be gone and never in your power again.
I only found a video with this. I need to talk.
Sorry, we have a few people in that room.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back to you when she stops talking, Edie.
She's done.
So I loved what you said, and I don't have the right words, the ones that you read, but mine is similar, about time limits at the end. If you do not use it to clear away your clouds, this is what mine says. If you do not use, well, let me go back. The governor of that universe of whom you constitute an emanation, and that there is a limit circumscribed to your time. If you do not use it, time, to clear away your clouds, it will be gone, and you will be gone, and the opportunity will not return. So I kind of like your words better. Has she stopped talking? Okay, go ahead and
Okay.
talk.
Okay.
Oh, now she's just started, so.
Okay. So
We'll just talk. Yes?
when
Okay.
so butterflies color.
Yeah,
Use your time wisely, Edie.
yeah. So I
Can
think
you see it?
I can't do this well. Like,
Okay, we'll come back to you.
All right.
So, Tanner.
Well, with the one Edie shared, I think it's really interesting because in it said, in this sentence, it is time now to realize the nature of the universe to which you belong and of that controlling power whose offspring you are, and to understand that your time has a limit set to it. And so you have to kind of realize, okay, I'm in this awesome world and I'm a child of our Heavenly Father, and we need to use our time wisely, or else there won't be much to show for life.
Good, Edie.
well, I think also that in that same place where it says
You
that
told us this once in science class, but I forgot.
that we need to realize we need to leave the world of daydreaming, basically, and come to the true world and seek that knowledge, and not to let like our mind drift. I read this book. It's the Outwitting the Devil, and it talked about how like one of the most powerful
50
things
trillion?
that Satan
Okay.
can
100.
one of the ways he takes over the universe is through drifting. We slowly become unaware that we're doing that. And I think procrastination is something so easy to do. And as you said, that we need to wake up and realize the nature of the universe.
Okay, and I have a question about that. What exactly does that mean, to wake up and recognize the nature of the universe? I'm asking any of you. Go ahead, Deshelle.
I think it means we need to realize the world around us, and it kind of goes back to like at the beginning of book 1 when he's talking about all those people that have helped influence his life. Just stop taking for granted what we see every day, and we need to notice it and take into our mind what it does for us. And I think that kind of goes along with it, learning about the universe before taking it for granted.
Yeah. Sometimes we live our life like a train. We've got a track. We don't have to think where we're going. We just look ahead and we just, boof, just blast through life, not thinking where we've come from, how we got on the train, where we're going, looking out the window, how this world was created, why am I here? All these questions. Sometimes we're just stuck on that train going, and we've got to get one thing done or something, but we don't see anything else. And I like what you said. You recognize what's going on. You go back in your past. You see who influenced you. That helps you to guide you to see more of a bigger picture.
But I also think that you could go the other way, that the person is not focusing on the end. They're not focusing on the goal. They're just in la la land, taking forever, not really
sleeping on the train.
Yeah, sleeping on the train, exactly. Which will lead to some sad story.
Good comment. Okay,
they'll miss their train stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like they'll leave everything up to fate, right? Talking about this Roman idea of fate. Hey, by the way, this guy, I'd like to ask, and maybe we discuss this every week for the next month, because we're going to discuss this guy for about a month, but does he believe in fate like the rest of the Romans? I don't know. Okay, you're saying no? It'd be interesting to figure out, because I think, we've been stuck in this fate idea for hundreds of years, and we're now past the time of Christ. This guy's not a Christian, but it would be interesting to read this, asking the question to yourself, does he believe in fate? Go ahead, Edie.
One of the reasons why I don't believe he believes in fate is because in almost every paragraph he talks about how it's up to us. If we're not going to do this, we're going to end up having. So, in a sense, if we're not going to do that, we will have that fate. But I don't think he believes in it's up to the gods.
He's more a responsible thinker, and if I'm going to get something done, I've got to do it. Or if something's going to happen, I've got to do it. Okay, good. Any other comments about that? Okay, do you have any other comments on what Edie chose, or do you want to go on to another one that you liked?
Yeah, we could go on, I think.
Okay, who wants to take us to somewhere they love?
I'll go.
Okay, great.
I think it's kind of cool. It kind of goes over. It's in book 2. It's the last paragraph of book 2.
Okay. A nice long one.
Yeah. Do you want me to read that?
If you could, because if I read it, mine's totally different. So yeah, you read it.
Okay. So, in the life of a man, his time is but a moment. His being as instant flux, his senses a dim rushlight. his body a prey of worms, his soul an unquiet eddy, his fortune dark, and his fame doubtful. In short, all that is of body and is coursing water, all that is of the soul, as dreams and vapors, like a life a wayfare, a brief sojourning in an alien land, and after repute oblivion, where then can a man find the power to guide and guard his steps? In one thing and one alone, philosophy. To be his philosopher is to keep unsullied and unscathed the divine spirit within him, so that it may transcend all pleasure and all pain, take nothing in hand without purpose and nothing falsely, or with dismultation. Depend not on one another's actions or inactions. Accept each and every dispensation as coming from the same source as itself. And last and chief, wait with a good grace for death, and no more than a simple dissolving of the elements whereof each living thing is composed. If those elements themselves take no harm from their ceaseless forming and reforming, why look with mistrust upon the change and dissolution of the whole? It is but nature's way, and in the ways of nature there is no evil to be found. And, I like that. It just made me think a lot about your life and how short it really is, and kind of going back to like Heavenly Father's plan for us. It just made me really think about that. Like, He put us here for a reason, and every time I think about that, I always go back to He put us here to learn and gain knowledge, because that's the only thing that we can have when we go back. And so this kind of, it like breaks your whole life up. It tells you what you need to do pretty much. It's like His plan in a couple paragraphs, and I thought that was really cool, just to review that and go over what I want my life to be, and the fact that I need to learn more. So I thought that was cool.
Super good. I love that. And I was thinking as you were talking that it makes other little unnecessary or insufficient things not be so important. The little things that bother you now really won't bother you, because you're seeing this bigger picture of yeah, this is here, but how can I react to it, rather than reacting to it. You're actually stepping back, and you can say, if that person wants to do those terrible things to me, I'm going to love them still and go on.
Yeah. I like that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think something really interesting is he uses a lot of beautiful language. Like, instead of asking the question, what is the meaning of life? He asks the question, where then can man find the power to guide and guard his steps, which sounds way cooler and a bit more thoughtful.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's saying to help to guide your steps and your choices, philosophy, so the love of knowledge or learning about knowledge, and learning all that you can help you in every way to guide your steps in life. So I thought that was cool.
That is so cool. Good. Edie, did you have a comment about that? Or any thoughts? It's interesting because we're caught up now. Maybe you're not as much as I am, but I've been caught up in things like the presidential elections. Well, we had our caucus last night, and I've also caught up in going to bed at midnight because of it, and I'm tired. But I also was really affected by the bombings that happened yesterday in Brussels, and all these things that are happening. And last night in the caucus, there were some people that were very Tea Party-ish. I'm a conservative, but I'm not Tea Party conservative. And there were some bashes going on back and forth. And as you're talking about this aphorism, it makes me think that, yes, I think we need to do our duty to get involved in the community and help direct people. But you can't direct them when you're so stuck in the rut of emotions and frustrations. It's almost like you need to lift yourself up out of it, look at the situation, recognize that there are bombings going on all over right now, and that there are people without homes, and there are people that have just lost their loved ones. 4 missionaries of our church were injured not fatally, I don't think, but pretty terribly because of the bombings. But you can lift yourself up out of that and recognize that God does know who we are, does know what's going on. What I imagine, Deshelle, you're a member of the church? Okay, yeah. I just now remembered what you had said. And I was talking about missionaries, and I thought, I wonder if she's a member. But yes, you are. But you can lift yourself up out of that situation. You can recognize, yes, these things are going on. But you don't have to get connected down on the worldly level with it and the emotions. You can find a way to peacefully deal with it and lift others to see it. How do you do that? How do you lift yourself up? When you're in the midst, think of the last time you were in the midst of frustration and involvement down on the worldly level. How do you lift yourself up when you just want to be down there and be mean and be fighting? How do you lift yourself up? Go ahead, Deshelle.
So I have a leadership class at school, and there's definitely a lot of frustration. We've got bunches of different grades, and recently we're trying to plan a dance, and we're trying to find a spot where we can do this, and it's been a big thing. And just the other day I was getting really upset and frustrated and trying to figure out what to say to get these guys to like get off of this one thing that has been already said, well, we can't do it here, and I just got really frustrated, and I was trying to move on, and they just wouldn't go. And afterwards, I kind of like broke down and was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And at that moment, I was like, okay, how do I get my voice out there without sounding like I really hate them, And so I think just rising above the fact that you're better than the anger, it really helped me, understand, hey, I need to just calm down, and I need to talk to them like humans and be focused on the fact that giving my opinion isn't working right now. I need to like get facts and talk to them. So I think that helped a little bit.
Wow. So kind of understanding where they are and coming.
Yeah.
But you're coming down to them because you lifted yourself up out of that worldly struggle, and you came down to them on their level, but you came down from up above. Which I'm not talking about pedestals or pride or anything. I'm talking about that higher vision that you just read to us about.
Okay.
And it's almost like they can feel that you're with them, but they're lifted up higher with you because of what you've just done.
Okay.
That's the kind of vision that I'm seeing. That's cool. Edie and then Tanner. Is that okay? Because Edie, you had your hand raised.
You can go.
Okay, go ahead, Tanner.
Okay, so I think the question that we're posing that's in the scriptures too is how do we be in the world but not of the world is what we're talking about here. And with the argument that Deshelle was talking about, I think people try and structure that sometimes to do debates where it's with rebuttals and opening statements and closing arguments so that it's more structured and not an argument. And that could be interesting. Is there a difference between argument and debate? Because debates are structured and so that they are not, flaming.
They give you limits
of passion and stuff. Instead, they are structured. Here are my points of why I am correct, and then here's my rebuttal of why those points are not correct. And so it's much more structured, and it makes a more logical argument rather than a fight, I guess you could say.
Yeah, those limits are important. Go ahead, Edie.
Well, in our society today, we've got like tons of things going on, like the elections, and with those elections and several other things, there's lots of anger involved. Lots of people are angry, and yet I don't see hardly anyone putting like logical sense into. They're just like kind of angry. They're not using their intelligence to do the good. And so I think it's really important to have that, as we read here. Philosophy is going to lift us higher from from that anger, from that world of, oh, you're so wrong, when we're actually, our society, we are the ones that are making our society that having these problems. I don't know.
Good comment. Yeah, Tanner.
Yeah, I think again with the debate thing, when you have anger and passion, or just you're really passionate about the topic you're debating about, a lot of times you'll try and like burst out with your points, and like sometimes you'll see it in like the presidential debates of like the moderator says, please don't interrupt the other person, and when things get a little bit heated. And I mean, even with my siblings, I see that if like something happens and there's trouble and they go to my mom to be like the judge of it, like and then like one of them starts telling the story of what happened and the other one's like, no, that's not how it happened, and then they start fighting and it's a big mess. And then I think it would be funny if it was like a structured debate. It's like, okay, your opening statements, what is the charge against the defendant?
I have found in my old age, because I've raised lots of children and 4 of them are out of the house, I have found out that when there is more structure like that as a mom with children, there's so much more control. For instance, I have now told my children there's absolutely no tattling. There's no tattling, but you can come to me very quietly without the other person knowing, and you can let me know what's bothering you.
The thing with that is when now that when it's all silent and everything, we know that there's something wrong.
Yeah, but it was better when there was more children at home. But you know what? It does limit a lot of the fighting. It's because it's not, there's something to it when a Trump is up there putting somebody down, or let's say my children are putting the other person down and they're allowed to just blare out what they want to say and the others are listening. There is a difference between that and, you know, a person coming to me quietly and letting me know it stops the fights. And so that's something that, thank heavens, old age and philosophy teach us. So any other comments on this? Should we stay with it or do you want to move on? Go ahead.
One last comment before
Okay.
I think I have one I wanted to share. But
Okay.
I think it's kind of funny to think how would our relations and our relationships with people be better if, instead of getting into like heated arguments with someone, if we had a argument of some sort, if we did it structured and logically rather than a passionate "I'm right, you're wrong" argument.
Exactly.
That's we have arbitrators called lawyers. But that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, we need to learn how to be our own arbitrators and to govern ourselves, not get heated in arguments and be logical.
Well, and it's really interesting because in like all the political, not all of them, but several of the political debates are going back and forth. I'm wrong. I mean, I'm right. And
I wish if they said that, we would not have a problem. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'd be okay if they said that.
Well, they're going back and forth saying things like that are they've gone to compare like some pretty anyways.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it's not about comparing who's better. It's about who can lead and who can really help this country become what it is, or lead the people to do that. Because, I mean, we are the people who are going to have to make America better, not the president. But he's our leader. He makes huge decisions, and we want someone who's reliable. And I haven't seen much of that, which is sad. I've just seen back and forth spitting.
Yeah, sometimes if you study their work as senators, you can see a little more of their honest living. But one more comment, and this has to do with Montesquieu, who studied human nature, and I've told you about this before, and eventually we will read him, but he's one of the writers. He wrote Spirit of Laws, and he's one of the writers that the founding fathers studied extensively. He basically said that people will always elect or not elect. They will always have a leader that matches their character. So if you have the spirit of wanting rights and a spirit of selfishness and a spirit of immorality, then we're going to have leaders that reflect that. So the leaders will always reflect who we are as a people. Now, I say as a people, Edie, you said we can be that change. If we're going to make, a change, we've got to be the ones that do it. There are some that don't reflect in their personalities in their leaders. But as a whole, our country is going down the pathway where Donald Trump is what we deserve, which it's not a happy thought, but just so you know, Montesquieu is right. If we can change, if we can send missionaries out and be the change, then we can actually get a good leader if we get as many people that will believe our cause.
There's a quote, I don't remember who it's. I think it was George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. I have no idea. But he said that the only way that America is going to be destroyed is through its own people, through its own laws. It wouldn't be another country destroying it or taking over. It's us that we're going to be the ones who will, if in the second coming
that's actually in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah. But there's a quote by
I think they all do say that. I think you're right. A republic, Benjamin Franklin said something like that a republic demands a moral and a virtuous people. And Jefferson said that too. So you're right. Good. Okay, let's go. Tanner.
Okay. So the one I liked is in book 3. It's the 13th. And it is, as surgeons keep their lancets and scalpels always at hand for the sudden demands of their craft, so keep your principles constantly in readiness for the understanding of things both human and divine, never in the most trivial action forgetting how intimately the two are related. For nothing human can be done aright without reference to the divine
Wow. Tell me why you like that.
I like that one because I think it kind of shows two things. You always need to have your standards with you so that you can always define who you are as a person and what you believe in. And also not just your standards, but like I said, tools for the craftsmen. If we are scholars and philosophers, and then we need to have those tools of that trade along with us. So being the arbitrator of our own discussions and checking yourself and knowing how to make logical statements and arguments and knowing where to look to learn things, we need to have those tools with us. I thought that was really cool.
Really good. Edie.
I think, going along with what Tanner said, I think that we also need to have, I'm just trying to think because there's another one that talks about this. Let me find it and then.
Okay, while you're finding it, I was just thinking of Aristotle, who we didn't read this in last semester, but because we didn't read far enough into it, but Aristotle talks about how he talks about the word virtuous, and he talks about a knife. And if the knife is sharpened and kept sharpened, it will do exactly what it was created to do. it will cut, and it will cut, in beautifully, in a sense. I say beautifully just because of the word kalon from Greek, that means doing what you're created to do and doing it beautifully. He says that being virtuous is actually fine-tuning yourself in all manners and aspects so that you become refined and honed, just like a tool, so that you can do exactly what the Lord wants you to do. And of course, Aristotle doesn't say exactly what the Lord wants you to do because he's a polytheist, but he did recognize that we have one purpose that we've been given. And the only way we can really do that is to be virtuous in all those aspects. Go ahead, Edie. Did you find it?
I couldn't find it, but I have another thought from the same place. I think that we're going to be in some situations where we have to rely on our our own principles, and sometimes it's easy to just, rely on other people and their thoughts and to go with the flow. But we need to have those principles, especially like in the gospel, we need to understand them and know them, because that's what's going to keep us going.
Good comment. Any other thoughts on this? Deshelle? Your wheels are turning.
Yeah. Taylor was talking about how we, I don't remember. It was really cool though.
Well,
Yeah, how we have to keep our, like our tools and our virtues, our standards with us all the time. And it made me think about, like at school, it's not everybody understands like where I come from, and so when a topic comes up and I'm not particularly okay with it, it's really hard for me sometimes to say, hey, I don't really, let's not talk about this right now. Can we like go somewhere else or talk about something else, And only recently has it been a little easier, because that's what we've been kind of talking about at church and stuff. And it kind of makes a big difference, I think, in the way people view what I believe in. So like most recently, I guess, is the biggest topic of like dating. A lot of people talk about how, if you go out and you date one person, then that's your date, and you can't go you can't talk to anybody else. You're not allowed to do anything. And I'm just like, how do you guys do that? That's so hard, because I want to get to know a bunch of guys and get to know what I really like in guys, like their standards, get to know them without being seen as a bad person. And to me, I'm not being a bad person. Like I don't think anybody would think I'm a bad person except for at school. And so I think that's just a really hard trial that I have to, and I have to remember my standards and not worry about what they think and just do what I think is right. So I think that's really cool how he explains to keep that close to you and really live by that, like make that who you are, like the surgeon does with his tools. So I think having that on you at all times really is a blessing to all of us. So that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah, and you're thinking of what it's doing for you, but what is it doing for the others as they look at that and they ponder it, and they're kind of lifted out of their own mindset, and some may be converted someday to what you believe, but maybe not, but maybe way down the road, years later, when they're raising their own children and they remember you and what you did, what influence that can have. Tanner.
Yeah, I was thinking about that and how you said maybe it would affect them. Well, kind of going back a ways to last semester when we read about the cave and that metaphor, how he had learned of the greater understanding and then tried to go back and teach it to his friends who were stuck in the darkness and still didn't know what the truth was, I guess. And he tried to teach to them, but they said he was a fool and that he had gone crazy because he left what they had known. He left the status quo, I guess, and he had learned more, and so he tried to teach them, but they rejected him as crazy because it was not what they had always known, and it was different. And so sometimes, like the people of the world or other people who don't share our beliefs or things, it's crazy, it's insane if they're talking about this, and if they think it's crazy that we have these different standards than everyone else, and why would you ever do that? But after a while, if you can help them to go through the process of learning why it's important, then sometimes they can see your view. And that's, I guess, part of the reason why debates and arguments happen when two people have a different view side, and things get a bit more heated, and one is defending one side and one is defending the other. And so sometimes if you can gently lead someone through the process of learning that, I think it's a way to kind of share your learning.
Yeah. This kind of leads right into our introduction to C.S. Lewis. Would it be okay if we go there? Because we're going to have, 4 classes, 3 or 4 classes, maybe just 2 more classes talking about this. I can't remember. But this idea of leading someone else to see something higher and better, that's a hard thing to do. Let me share my screen. Let me find my slide first. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. Let me share my screen. I'm really excited to be going into this last month, and is this what this is? Yeah. And finally doing something that we can relate to. I think it was difficult. I think we need to have a debriefing about Rome. I think it's difficult to spend so much time sometimes in ancient history without having this release. And if I were to teach this class again, I would have us be reading meditations all throughout the semester, just to kind of give us something light to talk about. But let's do a little introduction on Till We Have Faces. This is the book that you are to have read. I mean, you will have to read books 1 through 5 by next Wednesday. I keep saying Thursday, but it's Wednesday. No more classes on Thursdays. I got to talk to myself about that. So it's a 1956 novel by C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors. As you all know, he was a Catholic, then an atheist, then a Christian. And I say Catholic first because you have to be a Christian and a Catholic to be Christian. But a lot of people are just Catholic without really being Christian, if you know what I mean. So he was Catholic, then atheist, then Christian. So this is a myth retold. This myth comes from Cupid and Psyche. I was just gonna do this. Cupid and Psyche, based on a chapter of the Golden Ass of Apuleius. This is also written in Metamorphoses by Ovid. Anyway, it's a story that's been told for many, many years. And this story haunted Lewis all of his life because he realized that some of the main characters' actions were illogical. Think about what we've been talking about, okay? Some of the main characters' actions were illogical. And as a consequence, his retelling of the story is characterized by a highly developed character, the narrator. We're going to talk about who that is in just a minute, with the reader being drawn into her reasoning and her emotions. So we're going to be pulled into the first part of this book. We're going to be pulled into this character's reasoning and emotions, and it's illogical. Now, because I've said this, You're probably not going to be pulled in, but you can see how you could be, okay? This was C.S. Lewis's last novel, and he considered it his most mature novel that he had ever read. You've all read the Narnia books, I bet. This is even better. It's a little more difficult. It's for adults. He wrote it with his wife, and the story is set in a fictive kingdom of Glome. It's a primitive city-state whose people have occasional contact with a civilized Hellenistic Greece. And oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so we talked about that. It's I got this little article from this little link here. But this is some woman who wrote about this book. She says, based on a myth found in the Latin novel Metamorphoses, this retelling gives the story of an irascible king's 3 daughters. The eldest is a Frumposaurus Rex. This is the main character that we're going to be pulled into, and her name is Aurule, okay? The middle is a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, and the third is a beauty so innocent and profound she is taken for a goddess by the townsfolk, and that's Psyche. Excuse me. C.S. Lewis takes the title of his reworked mythical novel from a question asked by the heroine near the book's climax. The oldest daughter, Aurule, cursed with an irredeemably ugly countenance, having suffered the loss of her sister Psyche at the hands of the gods, wishes more than anything to render publicly her charge against the gods. So she's mad at the gods because they've taken Psyche away from her. She claims that the gods are guilty of stealing the greatest of human loves, namely her own love for Psyche. So she's in this blaming situation, okay? Still worse, the gods expect belief and obedience. They expect belief and obedience of Aurule while refusing adequate positive evidence for that belief. Aurule finally gets her chance in a vision wherein she journeys to a mountain containing the presence of the dead and those who would hear and answer her case against the gods. She blames the gods for not more directly revealing themselves and Psyche's enchanted castle. Had they done so, Aurule would not have lost Psyche to lifelong exilic wanderings. So you can see this little fight going on with Aurule against the gods, right? At the moment of her chance before the judgment seat, however, before the dead and the gods, she asks, how can we meet them face to face till we have faces? And this author says, I think it is the central question Lewis's masterful retelling. This is the central question in Lewis's masterful retelling. There's a typo there. In the hopes of sparking some late summer reading and some interesting debate, allow me to hazard an answer to Aurule's query. And you can go here and find out what she says. I probably didn't even need to keep that in here. That was funny. Okay. So, till we have faces, what could she mean by this? As you look at these 2 renditions of Aurule here, what do you think he might be meaning by till we have faces? What comes to mind? Go ahead, Tanner.
I think what comes to mind, first of all, just it may not be what the author C.S. Lewis was trying to, I guess, imply, but what I think of with Till We Have Faces and going along with the story is we have to, how can we be judged face to face until we can be seen as who we are in character, not in labels by everyone else or by our appearances. Like a lot of times there's like stereotypes and things. And I guess what she's asking is how can we be judged if we are not going to be judged by who we are instead of what we seem to be? Very
good. I think this is a good Good analogy, and almost you took the stage. Great. What do these busts imply here? And this is a rule. What do they imply as you look at those two? Go ahead, Deshelle.
It really reminds me of, I guess, like when we're children and we've got the veil over us. Like we don't really know what we came from and who we were or what we're coming here to do. We kind of have to like learn for ourselves. And so kind of like piggybacking off what Tanner says, we have to find for ourselves who we are instead of like looking at the past, instead of holding on to the past and trying to figure out what we were, just trying to find out who we are now and living with that. I think that's kind of what I get from those two pictures.
Great. That is very good. Any other comments, Jace? And by the way, welcome, Jace and Edie. Any other thoughts that come to mind you look at those busts? I really like what both Deshelle and Tanner said. Let's go on. So the first part of the book is written from the perspective of Psyche's older sister, Arul. Okay, and that's who, and I guess it's Orwal, sorry. I've read this book before, and in the class that I read this, we called her Arul, but it's Orwal, sorry. I even put that in and forgot. So in the first book is written from the perspective of Psyche's older sister, Arul, who is accusing the gods, okay? So the whole first part is about these accusations against the gods. Think of times in your life where you've kind of been upset with your situation. Why am I living here? What am I doing here? I could easily talk to Tanner and Edie because you didn't grow up in the places that you're living now. You know, why am I here? If you're not logical, it's easy to accuse the gods of why you're here. In the second book, second part of the book, the narrator undergoes a change of mindset. Okay, and Lewis would use this term conversion. Use the term conversion for this. And he understands that her initial accusation was tainted. Look at this picture, was tainted by her own failings and shortcomings, and that the gods are lovingly present in human lives. So we see this conversion going on at the end. And these questions, I really want to try and end at about 11:15 today. So let's go through these questions pretty fast. What constitutes a conversion? Jace, we haven't heard a lot from you, but answer that question, if you will. What constitutes a conversion, do you think?
Converting yourself from something that you were into something new.
Yeah. And what does it involve? What's the process?
It involves humbling yourself and submitting your will. Like usually when you use the word conversion to God's will.
Yeah.
Or in the story, the God's will.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Any other comments? Okay, so how do we recognize our mistakes? Anybody? We kind of talked about this in Marcus Aurelius when we discussed him a little bit. How do we recognize our mistakes when we're in the thick of it? When we're covered up with this veil, like Deshelle was talking about, we come from childhood and we really have been covered up of who we really are, and we're really trying to discover who we are. Believe me, at age 50, I still have little bouts of who I am, what I'm supposed to be doing. But it does get better, by the way. I remember being a youth and still trying to figure out who I was. But how do we recognize our mistakes? We can't just lift up the veil and go, oh, cool. Now I know who I am. How do we recognize this? Go ahead, Edie.
Well, as Jay said, there was humbling, but I also in the book we read, I think it was just Shell. She read, was it in book? I think it's in book 2, yeah, the very last paragraph. We need to have philosophy. It says that to have power to guide our steps. So, and I think that helps us recognize our mistakes, because if we're relying on things that are not very, I'm trying to think how to put this into words. I just think that we need to recognize that and be humbling, as Jay said, because we can philosophize, not be humbling, but I think we need to be humbling.
Humble. Good. Tanner, you're
So-
in the light.
Yeah, the sun's just coming up. So I think as we're talking about, as I say what I'm going to say, think a little bit about baptism and relating to this. But I think as we are trying to go through that conversion to who we were, to who we are meant to be, to fulfill our destiny and do things beautifully. We need to, before we can figure out who we are, we have to figure out what our tools are. Like in the meditations that I shared, we need to figure out what tools we are using, what our standards are, and what defines us before we can figure out what our profession is. So if you start realizing that, oh, look, I have a pencil, that's one of my tools. I have paper, I have a sharpener. Oh, I must be a writer. So to define who we are, you have to first see what tools you have and what you believe in, your standards. Who you are is dependent on what your standards are and what you believe.
Very good. That kind of goes along with, you kind of answered this too. You know, what do we want to do when we see our mistake and want to change? Now, sometimes we can see our mistake, but we don't want to change. But this question is actually, what do we do? What do we want to do when we see our mistake and want to change? I think we've kind of answered that. We humble ourselves, don't we? I mean, let's go on, because we've kind of answered this. Here's something. How does pride get in the way of our change? How does it? In what ways? Go ahead, Deshelle.
I guess in the scriptures a lot, we look at the pride cycle of the Nephites and stuff, and I think that really gets to them. I mean, they were really righteous people, and they were doing God's will, and then they get all that they want, and they take it, and they just keep it, and now they're not really. I guess they're taking it for granted again. Like they have an abundance of it, and so they're like, oh, well, now we don't really have to work for it, just given to us. And I think pride is just that we have, like, we see a problem, but we don't want to change it because I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I'm thinking we just pick this up and we put it right here because, it's so much better than knowing who we are and wanting to change. But we literally, I think pride is the veil. Now, at the beginning, when we're first children, it's not, but we have to be humble to remove it. But then when we're prideful, we put it back on. So very good comment. So here's some questions to ponder. We've got two more slides. I'm not going to go to this down here. So 2 more slides. So what do you think faces mean in his title? And maybe we've covered that a little. Go ahead, Tanner.
I think faces in his sense is definition of character or who we are.
Good. I like that.
Identity, that's the word I'm looking for.
Who are we? And we actually know who we are, and we can actually see who we are because we're not covered. Love that. What lesson might Lewis want to convey about, let me explain here, the type of love that Psyche is, no, excuse me, that Orwell is feeling for her sister Psyche. So they've grown up in the same house, under the same father, the king, and Orwell is ugly. Hate to say that, and Psyche is beautiful and innocent, and Psyche has been taken away. And what kind of love do you think Orwell had for Psyche? Let's just talk about that, and then we'll talk about the question I have written. Looks like I missed a question in there. What kind of love is that, Michelle?
I think like the first thing I want to think of is when you said that she's not as beautiful as her sister, it's almost like a jealous love, like a want to be more like her. And having younger siblings, like I can definitely see that. My mom's always telling me like they always want to be like you if they're doing the same thing you are. Like don't be mad at them. They're trying to be like you. And so I guess recently I think about that a little more, like when they're doing something that I'm doing and they really want to get to know what I like, why I like that. I think that's really cool, and that's just what I think about, like a jealous love, almost like they just want to be like you.
Yeah.
So I want to know you more, and that is a type of love you could say. So
I think you're right on. So what lesson? Oh, go ahead, Tanner.
Yeah, I think along the same lines of that. What was I going to say? Along the same lines, it's kind of in relation, sibling love, family love, but also I think because she was innocent and virtuous, she kind of held to that to see a light in, like, she probably had a lot of hard times being scorned for her appearance or what she looked like rather than who she was. And so seeing someone who is virtuous, and she kind of held to that more than she might have if she was beautiful but maybe not the best person.
It's so neat that you're saying these things, because what you're guessing about her is right on, and you're going to notice that in the book as you read it. So it's pretty amazing that you're coming up with these things. And I know we're giving some ideas, but yes, she felt that same feeling, and this was that kind of love that both of you are talking about. So this third one is not a question, but Lewis wants us to connect with a Christ figure in this story. We haven't really talked about him yet. And he wants us to see and connect with our relationship that we have with Christ. Okay? So here is C.S. Lewis, who is very Christian. He's pulling this pagan story out of ancient history, realizing that our foundation of education is formed upon the Romans and the Greeks. And he's pulling this out and connecting this story to Christ and us. And he wants us to make that connection. So look for that in this book, okay? Let's go, last two questions. What lesson might Lewis want to convey about Christ? How has the Christ figure impacted the characters or the plot? And this is a pre-question. You have not read this book. But how would you think the Christ figure impacts the characters of the plot, knowing what we know now from just this discussion? How does Christ impact characters? And we can go back to, is it here? We see the first part and the second part. You see this? How does the Christ figure impact the characters, do you think? Jace, what do you think?
Well, pretty much whoever follows Christ is become better in him. They become more like him, the more they associate themselves with him.
Excellent.
And also, like, he always teaches, and he never sends people away who ask.
Very good. Yes. And what could Lewis want to teach audiences by using the Christ figure? What do you think he wants to do with this book? Go ahead, Deshelle.
I think going back to the meditations, like writing down who we admire the most and using that in our lives, not just like looking at them and saying, oh, they're a cool person, taking that and using them in your life. I think that's what he could be meaning by the Christ figure, the people that they admire the most in life.
Very good. Yeah. This next question is about fear. C.S. Lewis touches on fear quite a bit in this book. What have you noticed in your life about the impact of fear? How has fear impacted your decisions? Anybody? In anything? Do you have a fear? Think of the fears that you might have, and how have they impacted you? Go ahead, Tanner.
Well, I think some people may say they have like a fear or a phobia, or they're scared of something like spiders or snakes or something like that. But those are, I think there are fears there's like rational fears and irrational fears. There's like fears of like dangers, like something that could kill you. That's a rational fear. But irrational ones are fear of other things. But I think rather than all those defined fears that people have personally and figure out once they experience a couple things, or due to some experiences, they may develop a fear. But I think all people start out with, like 2 or 3 basic fears that are the fears of the natural man that everyone has and has to learn to overcome. And those are the fear of change, the fear of failure, and I guess not the fear, but pride. And those 3 things are like the fears that every person starts out with as being as part of the natural man that they have to learn to overcome through life. The fear of failure, of change, and of being ridiculed. So pride, yeah.
Excellent. Whoops. Any other thoughts that come to your mind?
Well, I don't know if you can see, it's very weird.
Our screen froze.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think one fear that I noticed that I've had a long time is the fear of failure. I've always been afraid to like try new things because I'm always doubting myself. Like, what if I do it wrong and something happens and I don't do as good as I want to? And I do a lot of sports, and so when that comes into my head, I think that's kind of.
Did you stop talking? I loved what you said, Deshelle, but you stopped talking and you're frozen, so I don't even know if you can hear me. But I think it's really interesting to recognize the fears that we have, because once we recognize them, it's almost as if we've taken that veil off. We can see who we are, and we have a face now. But the fears actually cover our faces. And we'll go ahead and end here. But I'm super excited to begin to read a book that's going to nourish our souls. Both of these books are going to nourish our souls. So we're going to end this school year with a little more nourishment than swords and fighting and conflict and ambition and all the other stuff that we've been studying the last few months. This book is abstract. I want you to recognize that. It's not going to suck you in like the Narnia books do, but it may do better for you now that we have discussed this. And I hope those who are not in class today are watching this video and can be prepared to read this book. It can suck you in. Now that you know what you're looking for, now you can see this conversion process with Orwell and what she's going to go through, and you'll see this mature psyche who recognizes who she is, and she goes right along with the gods and moves herself with them. She's allowing them to move her where she needs to go. You will recognize some of the things that you do well and some of the things that you don't do well. It's going to help go inside you and help to change you. So that's what the purpose of this book is to help to change us to be more like Christ. I'm excited to read it. So by next Wednesday, we're going to read, we will have read 5 books in this. It's a little hefty, but it's literature now. It's going to be easier to read. So we'll go ahead and be prepared for that, and we'll end class. Do you have any questions? Anybody? Monday, we're going to be, you have your assignment due. 3 aphorisms you choose from Marcus Aurelius that you really like. Don't choose the ones that you talked about today. Choose 3 others, and we'll turn those in and talk about those. Any questions? Deshelle, thanks for coming. I wish that you could come next week. Maybe you could skip school. Just kidding. Okay, have a wonderful Easter, everybody. It's a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you Monday. See you.